Well, welcome everyone. My name is Claire Eagle and I'm the Community Engagement Manager here at Historic New Harmony. Historic New Harmony is a unified program of the University of Southern Indiana and the Indiana State Museum and Historic Sites. Following a successful year last summer and last fall of our virtual community conversation series, we wanted to continue that this year. And of course, we had to go a little bit more into the history, which we're going to be doing today. So before we go any further, I do have a few housekeeping things. Please keep yourself muted while Matthew gives his presentation. If you have questions or comments as he presents, please share them in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it and make sure they get asked during our Q&A session at the end. This presentation is being recorded. Will be posted to our Historic New Harmony playlist on the USI YouTube channel in the next few days. So if you have to leave early for any reason or are having connection issues, don't worry, you'll get to finish it out. So Matthew J. Mosca is a nationally recognized consultant in the field of historic paint research and restoration, employing microscopy, ultraviolet light exposure, and microchemical testing as a means of identifying the constituents of paint finishes. He received his education at Cornell University at the Graduate School of the Department of Agriculture and McCrone Research Institute, and was a National Trust Scholar of the Addingham School in Addingham, England in 1978. Several of his projects have won awards for excellence over the years, and some, such as Mount Vernon and Hope Lodge, where the technology of the 18th century was replicated as accurately as possible, have been considered landmarks in the evolution of the field. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Matthew. And you are good to share your screen, Matthew.
Very good. Okay. Hold on a minute. There we are. Okay, here we go. My first exposure to New Harmony actually came through the third village that was built by the Harmonists. That's Old Economy Village, and there then I was had the opportunity to work at New Harmony as well, and became really fascinated with the whole story of the Harmonists. They were a group led by Georg Rapp, the founder, who was an absolutely remarkable character. It must have been an extraordinary, probably quite a difficult person as well, but became very much held very strong religious beliefs. And by the 1780s, 1785 exactly, he was ready to break with the Lutheran Church in his hometown in near Wittenberg in Germany. And by 1790 had between 10,000 and 12,000 followers who believed, as he did, that the second coming was imminent and would happen within their lifetime. That was a guiding principle of theirs, and one that was going to influence everything that they did. As you can see from these significant dates, George, I'm going to call him George Rapp from here on out, outlived his son, Frederick, who was also very much dedicated to his father's vision and was also a brilliant manager of funds. One of the things that the Harmonists did was that they believed they had to, because the second coming was going to be soon, it was important for them to perfect everything that they did, to strive for perfection in everything, their personal, including their personal endeavors as well as their communal endeavors. And so they made a great deal of money doing this. By 1803, the authorities in Germany were rather startled by this large group that had broken away from the Lutheran Church. And of course, the Lutheran Church then excommunicated George and his followers. They decided by 1803 to leave for the United States and settled in a town they called Harmony in Western Pennsylvania. It still exists, though it's been somewhat subsumed into, of course, more recent construction. And when they were there, they realized that they were not terribly welcomed by the people who were already there, who were suspicious of the way they lived, the fact that they had a lot of money, and the other problem is that the town did not have very good river connection. So it was hard to transmit goods, and their principle, they were very much involved with trade as well as industry. So by 1814, they decided to leave for Indiana. Now, all of these events were somewhat prompted by dreams and visions that George had. And one vision that he had, this is the Harmonist Church that was built in New Harmony. And this building is absolutely astounding for its quality of construction, and of course for the enormous scale of the building. It was constructed in 1822, and in 1822, this was very much at the edge of the frontier. A structure like this would have been very difficult to erect, even if you were in the East Coast, let alone at the very edge of the nation. It's described as being, let's see, 120 feet. Each of the wings is 120 feet long, and there was a central auditorium, 80 feet square, that was, the roof was held up by 28 massive columns inside. So this is a major, major structure. This is a drawing of the same building, the church, done in 1825 by a visiting French artist, Charles Lasserre. And you can see the door frame over there on the left, that wing to the left, and it's in that door frame that our great window was set. Here it is. This is the door frame, which was removed from the church building and installed on the one remaining wing after the building was taken down in 1870. Clearly, the builders of the Harmonist Church must have had knowledge of different design principles that were in the nation at the time. This particular one, this niche, is from a very popular book, a design book, pattern book, by Batty Langley from the 18th century. And you can rather see the relationship with the door that from which the fan light was taken. That door was known as the Door of Promise. It was the main. And another view which shows another design, again related to the Door of Promise, this one from Asher Benjamin's Country Builder's Assistant, from the late 18th century. So one or more of these design books were probably known or owned by someone in the Harmonist Society. Here we are again. This is the interior view of the fan window. I like pointing out the fact that actually getting wood to make all of these loops is a difficult task. They were masters at everything that they attempted. These are the specific locations of the paint samples that we'll be looking at. All right, this is actually from the exterior face of the fanlight window. And this is paint sample 1. And what you're seeing here is, from a paint analysis point of view, is quite remarkable. Layers 1A, 1B, and 1C, a sequence of 3 layers of a combination of Prussian blue and white lead were applied as the original finish. What makes this remarkable is that it was known that Prussian blue was, well, first of all, it was pretty expensive. It was an expensive pigment, and it was known to fade. So to the rear of a building was an indication of how significant the building was. This is the interior face, the Prussian blue paint color made with white lead and Prussian blue pigment. In this case, they used a varnish coating as a sealer on the interior, which is a technique that was commonly used. It was interesting that they did not do this on the exterior. I'm going to go back to the exterior too. I'd like to point out, you'll notice that there are individual pigment particles. Those are labeled P there, that those are agglomerations of Prussian blue, which generally forms a very finely divided pigment. And it was, it literally changed the palette of the world, shall we say, when it was first discovered. 10. All right. I'd like to look at the different components of the paint. And paint, of course, would be made then as now with solids that were usually in suspension in a drying oil. So you have the pigments with the dry components, a drying oil, and usually some bit of volatile thinners in order to promote the drying of the oil, which was always a bit of a problem, as we'll see. Okay. White lead, this is actually a coil of lead metal that has been exposed to the fumes of vinegar, and it forms this white salt on the surface. This was one of the most important pigments time. And this is the process. They would have been, the coils would have been set in terracotta pots with the vinegar at the bottom. This is called the Dutch process. And then these pots would have been stacked in a shed with usually manure packed around them. This would be done probably this time of year, maybe April. And the shed would be closed up with layer upon layer of these pots and layer upon layer of manure, and let set for the entire summer. The heat of the summer would promote the decomposition of the manure, which would create carbon dioxide and acetic acid, the vinegar, on the surface of the lead, created the lead white pigment. This is a cross section of lead white, some chalk, which was frequently added to lead white, and Prussian blue seen in transmitted light under a polarized light microscope, which is the way these things are usually discovered. One of the important books of the era was Robert Dossey's The Handmaid to the Arts. And he points out that how important Prussian blue was, that it would greatly tint white lead. The Prussian blue that was being produced at his time, and this is in the 1760s, was very likely to be adulterated. And as you can see there, he says the common Prussian blue, however, found in the shops, which is prepared almost wholly at present, sold at very low prices, can be very little depended upon in paintings of consequence. And what happens is that many of the producers would adulterate Prussian blue with indigo, an inexpensive and organic pigment. As you can see, the Prussian blue pigment on its own is extremely dark, and it would be very easy to add indigo to this and sell all of it as Prussian blue, more expensive Prussian blue, which even in the 18th century. This is indigo, which creates a much more grayish blue color than Prussian blue. And actually, this is a combination of indigo used to tint plaster. One of the characteristics of Prussian blue is that it cannot be combined with lime. It is not lime-proof and will turn gray if it is combined with lime. The oils that were used in painting were primarily linseed oil. Occasionally other oils, oil of pinks and nut oils, were used, but they were much more expensive. And linseed oil was generally commonly available. To remove the outer husk from the seed, and that introduction of heat causes a chemical reaction in the oil that means that it will tend to yellow, tend to discolor over time. And indeed, one of the processes for preparing oil, particularly for exterior use, is that it needed to be boiled boiled with red lead, as in this description from Hezekiah Reynolds' Ship and House Painting of 1812. Shows how a pound of red lead would be used at the base of a copper pot, to which 4 gallons of oil would be added, and then gently boiled until clarified. Do not do this at home. This is incredibly dangerous, you can imagine, because red lead is a poisonous, lead poison material. Its instructions, and realize the toxic materials that were commonly used. Here's an example. I bought this many years ago. It's an example of a boiled linseed oil. They used to sell this for artist use. I'm not sure that it's still sold, but you can see how dark the oil has gotten. And even though they would more likely to be using cold pressed, what's called cold pressed linseed oil, the fact that the initial exposure to heat for the removal of the husk would still mean that it would age and discolor over time. This is an example of discoloration and another phenomenon called saponification. What happens with white lead is that the over time, a soap-like surface is created by polymerization with the oils, and that reduces the opaque quality of the lead, and sometimes it can look almost transparent or translucent as a result of this change. And indeed, once a paint surface is overpainted, the discoloration, the yellowing process accelerates. So you can find very, very altered colors, such as this case. On the left there, the dado there, that is the original surface exposed at a house called Sabine Hill in eastern Tennessee, dating from 1810. The background, which now is this brown, and also you're seeing some of the, in certain areas, you're seeing some of the wood through the saponified lead white that's grown quite translucent. It's lost a great deal of its opacity, and of course the discoloration of the white by the yellowing of the linseed oil. On the right is a restoration of what it would have looked like when new. So it's a dramatic example. You can also see the blotches of Prussian blue and red that were added to this emulation of marble in this case. The upper wall, those boards of the upper wall above the chair rail, actually not all that different from the Prussian blue color of our window of the door of promise. Now I'd like to look at how these paints were prepared by hand. This is a muller and slab. The muller is that rounded stone, and the slab, obviously, is the flattened stone at the base. These are both made from porphyry, an extremely hard stone of the Mediterranean area. And this example is at the National Museum in Athens and dates to the 4th century BC. What's kind of fascinating is that, and this is an indication of how to do the grinding of the paint, combining the pigment and the oil. And you can see the date there, long before New Harmony. Just like the 4th century BC example, this example is from about 1825 and shows that the process by hand had not changed in millennia. At the upper adjacent to the slab, you can see brushes. Those are the types of brushes that were used for painting. They were round brushes and paints of the period. This particular example shows you a red ochre, the dry pigment there being ground with linseed oil. And here's an 1830 view of a paint shop. And you can see the fellow on the right there, an apprentice, no doubt, grinding the paints, and the paints being kept in sealed casks. Above the fellow grinding the paint, you'll see suspended paint brushes that are similar to the ones in the previous slide. Now, since the Harmonists were interested in technology, I suspect that they would definitely have had one of these paint mills. This is an invention that was done, existed certainly by 1830, probably earlier. This particular one was patented in 1830. And you would take your components, let's say white lead and linseed oil, and just sort of mix it loose into the hopper there. And then by turning the crank, this shows you the plate that on which the hopper sets. And as it's turned, the materials in the hopper, the linseed oil and the white lead in our case, would be ground against the underside of the hopper to make the paint. That would gradually flow down where that blade at the left would scrape it off, and the paint would fall into a cup or some sort of bucket below, greatly reducing the time and labor involved in making paint. Here's an example at an historic house in Virginia of a paint mill. And you can see that in this case, they cut a hole in the tabletop so that the paint could fall into a larger bucket underneath that hole. Other examples of similar processes, and again, considering how advanced the Harmonists were, they very well may have had something like this. This particular example survives in Connecticut, And here it's the same essential process, but you could stand at it and just turn the wheel, and it would grind the paint in the same type of system. This is looking into the hopper. And of course, what's striking is how it doesn't seem to have ever been cleaned. And there's this extraordinary accumulation of paint around the inside of the hopper. Another fascinating example, I don't know how common this would have been, but here's a horse-drawn system with all sorts of gears that made it possible to grind a number of paints from the same labor of the horse going round and round. And this is an English example. So it was clearly labor-saving devices were applied to paint manufacture before the middle of the century. Now, in most cases, the Prussian blue color will fade. It was subject to fading, and which is sort of unfortunate because it fades to a color that, generally speaking, was much more attractive to people who were restoring in the 1930s and 40s. This color created, inspired many blue grays and sort of slate colors that appeared in color charts, historic color charts. And here's an example of one. This from a Benjamin Moore color that was available and is still available and still very popular, based on the faded appearance of Prussian blue and white lead. I'm happy to report that our Harmonist blue, which you can see here on the far right, has inspired a much more accurate, one of the colors, of course, not the only color, but one of the many colors of discoveries of Prussian blue, and a better understanding of how paints interact and age. These are new colors that have been put forth by the Colonial Paint line that is being marketed by Benjamin Moore. So I'm happy to suggest that the paint of the Harmonist window, the Great Window, was part of the trend to create that. One of the other really interesting paints that was used was the brick stain that was used on the buildings. This recipe, which came from the Shakers, with whom the Harmonists communicated a great deal, describes how you can make a stain for brick using lime and actually milk. And this is, I've actually done this. It's quite a lot of fun to do because it's like mayonnaise. It's an emulsion because you're combining and oil. The lime and the milk creates lime caseinate, casein being the glue binder, and then adding oil to it. You beat in the oil, and it makes a rather remarkable paint, very strong, and clearly was used on the buildings in both New Harmony and in Old Economy. That recipe references a house in South Union where where that paint stain was used. And the South Union they're referencing is the Shaker community in South Union, Kentucky. And this is the brick house. It's entirely possible that not only was the brick coated with, and of course the mortar would also be coated with the that brick stain, and then they would go back and paint in each mortar joint with a very thin white line in order to give it the appearance of very fine masonry. They obviously had a lot of time to devote to that because it's very laborious. Now, this is the remarkable map of New Harmony that was done, let's see, in 1832 by Walrath Weingartner. And the pink buildings, here's, you can see the church there towards the bottom, but all the pink buildings were brick, were the brick structures. And at first I thought, well, the pink is generally used in watercolor to indicate brick, even into the 20th century in cross sections that were done long before, of course, before CAD drawings, but if that was the convention. But indeed, they may have been pink. This is the community house number 4, which then became converted into the Thrall's Opera House in 1888. And inside, there's a formerly exterior surface that has a pink coating underneath a later gray coating. And all of the gray coating we know was there and probably old by the time graffiti was painted on the surface, one of which is dated, let's see, I've got to find this date here. It's 1877. Pink coating was applied by the Harmonists on community house number 4. And what they did, when you look at the formula that the Shakers gave them, they are recommending using a red pigment called Spanish brown, which is a rather adulterated, a rather dull red. So it's much duller than red ochre, Venetian red that we might be more familiar with. But instead of using the Venetian red or Spanish brown rather, to make the lime coating, they used brick dust. They had a great deal of it, and it makes a wonderful pigment ground up. Here's a cross section showing the brick at the base and the lime coating, which is somewhat, you can tell is going to be somewhat lighter in coloration, suspended. when they, not only did they use it at New Harmony, but when they moved back to Western Pennsylvania, which was accomplished in around 1825, again because of dreams and visions that George Rapp had. Also other reasons, including illness in the community in Indiana, because it was rather swampy land. But anyway, they moved back to Western Pennsylvania and established their last community, which they called Economy. And they did indeed expect that Jesus would return, dwelling with them in this town, in Economy. And on the surface of the mortar of the feast hall, which is the building we saw, was the major construction at Old Economy, the major building. There is the same sort of pink lime casein milk paint that in the mortar. You can see it against the white mortar quite clearly. And here it is on one of the buildings, actually the kitchen building. Let me make sure that this is the kitchen building at New Harmony, excuse me, that shows the remnants of the pink casein paint still hanging on in the recesses of the brick. This is a good testament to how durable this material is. And the entrance to the feast hall brings us back to our door of promise on the great church of New Harmony. Virtually the same design, though not the same fan-like great window, but you can clearly see the relationship here from this photograph was taken in 1906. And now, of course, the replication of the Door of Harmony at the Church Park in New Harmony. There's one thing I'd like to add. This is pretty much the end of my presentation. I'd love to be part of, I think we have to do archaeology. I can't wait to see what might remain at the site of the great church that was there. The harness themselves in 1874. So who knows what might be underneath in the park now. So with that, I'm going to, I hope there are questions and I'll be happy to answer any of them.
Hi, Matthew.
Claire,
I'll give it a few seconds, and you're welcome to stop sharing your screen if you would like to, but I'll give it a few seconds for people to ask questions. From your last comment, interestingly enough, there's actually a dig that started yesterday that's ongoing in Church Park, not at the site of the brick church, but at the site.
Wonderful.
Yes, but at the site of the original frame church is what they're looking for. So that is it's an archaeology field school from USI that's being led by Dr. Mike Strzeski. So I'll let you know if they find anything interesting.
Wonderful.
And again, as I put in the
Very
chat, if you have any questions, please share them and we'll make sure we ask. That was a wonderful presentation. I learned quite a bit, so I hope everyone that joined us did as well.
Thank you.
Yes, as Dan said, we'll also, for those of you that were interested in the dig, we'll make sure that we shared a few pictures on our Instagram the other day from something else that they were working on, but we'll share some more as well from the church site. Oh, and it looks like we have a question. When taking samples, which is easier to obtain samples from, wood, brick, or stone?
Probably wood. I would say wood is the easiest. Stone can be quite difficult. It's because of the hardness of the substrate, and stone being the hardest can be difficult to take samples from, because you really do need to have a little bit of the substrate attached to the accumulation of the paint layers. You want to make sure that you have everything that was there.
And I actually have a...
It's possible, of course, to get it from... Sure.
So I have a question. Can you maybe explain the difference? I'm not sure I know the difference, but the difference between a paint and a whitewash. I know that whitewashes were typically used in the era of the Harmonists as well. And how do those two differ?
That's actually a very good question. Whitewash generally, the basic whitewash is lime, water, and usually some salt thrown in, which helps it become a lime paint, and lime coatings will have more lime. It won't be as thin. It'll have more lime in it. Very often there'll be a pigment, a lime-proof pigment like yellow ochre or red ochre that's added to give the lime coating a color. And it can be it's frequently made with milk because you want to have that combination of lime and the casein glue binder of the milk, which of course are what the curds of milk are. That's the glue binder is in that. So that can be quite a thick layer. It can be quite a heavy layer as well, because it's a thick, there's more lime in it. And it's opaque. Lime whitewash, when it goes on, it's going to look transparent, but one.
Another question. Did the Prussian blue have any symbolic meaning beyond the aesthetic in the window and other buildings of this period? We know from previous presentations that we had that the Harmonists were all about their symbolism.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Not that it may very well have been. I do not know of any reading what I've been able to read, but that's something that could well have existed. Old Economy Village, there's a grotto building that was at the center of their labyrinth. They have a labyrinth there, and the interior is very much intact. was done with elaborate plaster work and had a lot of a Prussian blue color used on the interior. And it's still, so it may very well have had particular significance for the harmonists. But of course, blue is the color of the sky, and that was something that was significant in the Renaissance. So it may come down from that as well.
Okay, I think that was our last question. So
Actually, I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Earlier, when you were showing us the slides of the paint samples, you said on number 2 that they had varnished the outside of the blue.
Yeah.
And they hadn't done that on the exteriors. But in that first picture you showed us, there looks like there's a thick layer of varnish on top of that blue. Was that added later, do you think, under the white?
I think I may have said that, but if I did, it was a mistake. What I thought I said was that they used a varnish for the sealer of the wood on the inside, and they did not use the varnish for the sealer of the wood on the outside. But indeed, the paint.
Uh-oh.
I think we lost him.
I think we did lose him. Oh no.
Oh no, come back.
He was answering your question. I'm so sorry, Jennifer.
Well, when he showed that first slide, I mean, you can see a layer of varnish. And so that's why I was like, well, you know.
Yeah.
Is
well,
that later?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and just wrap up. Maybe as I'm wrapping up, he'll pop back in. Oh, I think he is popping back in.
Oh, there he is.
Matthew,
Something happened.
Oh, there you are.
Did the answer get lost?
Yeah, I think you were towards the end of your answer and you popped.
Did the answer get lost?
Yeah, so you said it was used on the exterior or the interior ones, but not the exterior?
It was used inside as a sealer on the wood. So it's both underneath the Prussian blue and on top of the Prussian blue.
Okay.
On the outside, they did not use it on the wood. They only used it as a coating on top of the Prussian blue, which would have accomplished making the blue even more intense, which was something they liked to do for most of the paint colors in the 18th and early 19th century. A lot of them were coated with varnish so that it would intensify the color.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry for the confusion.
No, that's all right. I was just curious.
Right.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here, Matthew. I'm just going to kind of wrap it up. Just before I do, as I mentioned at the beginning, this presentation was recorded, so we will be posted on our YouTube page in the next few days if you'd like to rewatch it or share it with your friends and colleagues. And again, thank you to Indiana Humanities for their grant, which is able to cover our costs for this virtual conversation series. So before I go, just want to let you know what's upcoming. On Tuesday, June 22nd, we're going to have a virtual visit from Thomas Say, the frontier scientists. Imagine stepping aboard an experimental ship and making a 2-year journey to study alien life. Thomas Say will recount the story of his 1819 zoological exhibition to the Rocky Mountains, and we'll be able to ask him other scientific questions about his work as well. And again, that's from 1 to 2 p.m. on Tuesday, June 22nd. Stay connected with us. Our website is usi.edu/H&H, and we have tons of great stuff going on, and you can learn all about our other Robert Owen 250th programming. Of course, follow us on social media. We have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and then we also have our monthly e-newsletter, which you can find at usi.edu/inharmony. And we're always putting in great articles about what's going on in town, as well as kind of keeping you updated on the projects that we're working on. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. We really appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Be safe.